February 21st. It's President's Day here in the U.S. It's 5 a.m. here in New York. Thanks so much for getting an early start with me. As Laura Bear Christine has the day off. Welcome to our viewers in the United States and all around the world. We begin this week with growing certainty that Russia's Vladimir Putin has decided to invade Ukraine, and expanding efforts in diplomacy to deter such an invasion. President Biden has now agreed in principle to sit down with Putin so long as Russia does not invade Ukraine. But U.S. officials tell CNN no concrete plans have been made for this meeting, brokered by French President Emmanuel Macron. Meantime, U.S. officials say new intelligence shows Russian commanders have now orders to proceed with an attack on Ukraine, and new satellite images show Russian military activity near Ukraine's northeast border is rapidly intensifying. Here's Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin on what this all means for the people on the ground.
You could see a significant amount of combat power move very quickly down to take Kyiv. So in terms of the types of things that could happen, one only needs to look at what's on the other side of the Ukrainian border. If he employs that kind of combat power, it will certainly create enormous casualties to the civilian population.
Enormous casualties. Let's bring in international security editor Nick Payton-Walsh, who's live for us in Ukraine this morning. Nick, what are the Ukrainians supposed to make of this will they or won't they business? All these increasingly certain predictions of a U.S. invasion, but coupled with all this very high-level diplomacy.
Yeah, I mean, it's diplomacy that's on the foot today. It seems the French President Emmanuel Macron very optimistic that he can engineer this Biden-Putin summit. But we have to also point out that the Kremlin have said there are no concrete plans for that at the moment, and Russian President Vladimir Putin will be talking to his Security Council today. So here in Ukraine, certainly I think that the longer the number of days that we see these incessant drumbeat of warnings continue, people do grow either incredulous or nervous, frankly, at whether something is imminent. But you just have to look, frankly, at the volume of forces gathering around Ukraine's borders, the satellite images that show some of these forces moving from their garrison areas towards the border themselves, the consistency of the U.S. message here, which has outlined a very detailed plan. They believe they have intercepted or obtained what Vladimir Putin wants to do here. And then, of course, as well, what we're seeing in the separate areas of the East. It's important to see that in the wider narrative, because many believe that the allegations coming out of there are often entirely false, of shelling by Ukrainian forces and evacuees leaving in large numbers towards Russia. So Russian-backed separatists claim is the pretext that the US has often warned would be needed by Russia in order to launch a broader invasion. That hasn't happened yet. So far, what we are seeing is a
why isn't anybody else like? Why isn't Belarus scared? Why are they happy with everything?
Ominous, frankly, and the beginning of this separatist activity we saw last week does appear to be feeding this narrative of something pretty bad happening in the days ahead.
All right, thank you for that. Let's turn now to our CNN international correspondent Fred Fleischer, who is live for us in Moscow. Fred, good morning. What is the Kremlin saying about the possibility of this meeting between President Biden and Vladimir Putin? How likely is this in their view?
Hi, Laura. Well, they're not completely shooting it down per se, but they are saying it's not necessarily something that's going to happen very quickly. It was part of this
thinking about it today, Ukraine is technically in Europe, like geographically, but I don't think it's. I think it might be more Asian and Russian by population. It's not like, okay, we're in Europe, so we're automatically in the European Union. It doesn't work that way. I think there's some misconceptions about Ukraine. There's not a big Ukrainian population in the U.S. So they're not well represented. But the U.S. is still going to do something there.
To continue the dialogue on the minister's level, for instance, later this week, Secretary of State Blinken will be speaking and will be meeting his counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister. So certainly the talks are continuing.
So they have a whole lot of ties to Russia already. They use a lot of mostly Russian weapons. Russian tanks, helicopters, grenades, landmines, AK-74. There's a lot of Russian weapons. So that means Russia has a lot of influence there, and they probably got to go there and teach them. But they had a few things from the U.S. They have them. Just like Humvees and transport vehicles, though, pretty much, and maybe one or two other
Whether
things.
this was a regular meeting, they said, no, this was not a scheduled meeting. So certainly this is something that could yield.
And it looks like the U.S. gave those things to them after Russia was aggressive in Crimea in 2014, 2015, thereabouts.
Yeah, the timing of that is certainly notable. Fred, thank you for your reporting as always. So the increasingly tense situation at the Ukraine border is expected to dominate a meeting of the EU foreign ministers getting underway soon in Brussels. So let's go live to Brussels where we find CNN's Scott McLean. Scott, there are calls for the EU to start saying...
Imagine if, like, just Ukraine wants to try it again. They said, wow, last time we got all this help from everybody because we were scared of Russia, and now maybe we'll get a bunch of help again.
The short answer to that question, Laura, is no. But you're right. It was actually
I don't think the game show host is connected to Russia per se. It's not like his government might be.
Russia is going to invade Ukraine, then his point is, look,
I don't think it's the whole entire country, it's government against Russia's government. I'm sure there's a lot of sympathizers.
To make this morning to the foreign ministers from the 27 EU member states. He met with them
Because it used to be
for
part of the
about
Soviet
an hour
Union.
and a half, or at least that's
Yes,
what he was scheduled to meet with them for. And the EU's top diplomat, Joseph Borrell, says that, look, that package of sanctions that the EU is proposing, it is already prepared and ready to go, but still needs to be approved by each of the 27 member states. He says that that is very likely, or he's confident that that will happen, but it will not happen until he says it's the right time. In other words, after a Russian invasion.
Well, the weird thing is they're going to need to give them the sanctions for the incursion into the eastern part of the country, the Donbass region and stuff like that. So then they should have done the moment they barged into the area. That must have been a weird day. I was thinking about that earlier. Imagine that. Just living way out in the country on the edge of your country's borders. And then just one day, a whole bunch of your neighboring country, a foreign country, just comes and settles in next door on your property. And you know they don't belong there. But you know you can't really do anything about it.
Yeah, all right, Scott, thank you for that.
That's basically what happened, I think.
All of this as new satellite images released Sunday show Russian ground troops moving out of their garrisons and training fields and advancing closer to Ukraine's border. Let's bring in retired Air Force Colonel and CNN military analyst Cedric Lake. Colonel, so nice to have you. I feel like we've been going through this for the past couple weeks now, and it keeps inching closer and closer and closer. The U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin says Russian tanks rolling into Kyiv now is, quote, highly likely. When you see these new images, what's your reaction to this apparent escalation in military activity?
Well, good morning, Laura. It's very much like you said, we're inching closer and closer to the border, and every time they do something like this, it means to me that they're getting more and more ready to actually cross that border. So if they do that, that's going to, of course, change the entire equation when it comes to both the military aspect and the diplomatic aspect. What I do see is more preparations, more efforts to bring frontline combat troops forward, more efforts to ensure that logistical training is taken care of so that they can take care of supplies, resupplying their forces should they go in, and of course medical care for those forces. So there's a lot of activity in that regard, but it looks closer and closer on the ground at least, but they're getting to a point where they'll actually move across the border.
Can we play this out just hypothetically? You have so much experience here. Is this the type of thing we'll see overnight, just troops storming across the border, or will it be sort of a more slow incursion that sort of drips and drabs over several days?
So they can do it either way. The Russians could go in and take some grabs, or they could go full war all the way. I think what they will do in this particular case is they'll move really quickly. They'll do everything very fast. Usually what they would do is take a lightning strike, and as Secretary Austin mentioned, they would go in and take Kyiv. That would be one major way of doing this, and kind of having a very quick timeline so that people can't respond to it. If they go in groups and grabs, it'll be easier to respond to their efforts. If they go quickly,
But they're all smack next to each other like sardines.
So President Zelensky
Ukraine's pretty boxed in.
frustration about
So I don't know. If Russia wants to do drills right on the border, to me, an offensive drill right on the border looks just like a defensive drill right on the border. There's very little difference. Maybe it's like enriching uranium. Whether they use it for energy purposes or a bomb, it looks the same. Right? Because you're preparing the exact same way. Whether Russia is entering Belarus, or I mean, whether Ukraine is entering Belarus, or whether Russia is entering Ukraine, you still probably position everybody the same way. So they're just getting ready for one or the other. They're not necessarily going in anywhere. And if they do, I think people are going to go in right after them and get them out. And sanction them, hurt them economically at the very least. They might just do that just because they're acting like they might go in. They're saying they're not going to go in. But some people benefit politically and are harmed politically. Like I said, Russian people tried to help Trump get elected. They bought ads in the United States. They hacked websites, things like that, for the Republican Party, basically. So if Biden decides to sanction them, I think sanctions have to go through Congress. Right? He could sanction people that he knows is going to support meddling in 2024 if he wants.
And chaos on the court. We'll tell you what that Michigan
It might just be a rubber stamp thing in Congress, though. I don't know if it's anything they have to really vote on. But everybody's talking about it, though, Republicans and Democrats. So, Republican, but not every single Republican, just a couple of them have said it. So I know it's they're down with it, even if they got to fall on their sword or something. Lindsey Graham said he wants the sanctions and he's in charge of military. Or I mean, he is a veteran rather. So sometimes he speaks for them. Good old military-industrial complex. It's kind of like a branch of government. And I think it works in conjunction with the Democratic Party sometimes. Like I think Joe Biden got the intelligence he says that he got about Russia planning to invade, but I think it was probably one piece of intelligence with conflicting intelligence, and he just chose that one and read that one, and he believes that one. And it's on him, I mean, whatever. He's just setting himself up for victory, basically, and wants to come out smelling like roses. So if he does sanction them, and they don't attack, he could be like, yep, see, there we go. There's my sanctions. And we'll never know. They could probably never wanted to attack to begin with. Never invaded. I'll never know. It's like with the vaccines. You'll never know what it would have been like if you didn't get vaccinated or if you did get vaccinated. Whichever one you didn't do, you never know what it would have been like. I thought that the vaccine stuff and the COVID stuff is starting to back way down all of a sudden. I thought they jumped the gun a little bit because the deaths just barely started declining the trend. But everybody wants it to get back to normal. And schools, I guess, probably going to start up or something. I don't know, there could be a sub-variant that goes around if there already is at least one or two sub-variants.
Almost is a provocative act at this point. Yes, diplomacy is still on the table. It's always on the table until the moment when war begins, and frankly, then it's still on the table. So, but I just think this has been a bobble. In a way, Putin is playing chess, and Biden is playing a bad game of checkers, and it's kind of obvious to most people that there's a lot of hemming and hawing going on inside. instead of direct conversations. If you don't go directly to the source and be a little more quiet so that you can listen to what is really going on, what the motivations are, then you don't get to the solution. And we're not at a solution because in many ways it's been more noise than quiet.
Well, if Putin chooses a full-scale invasion, and we do have intelligence that suggests that is where
See, this seems like such a waste of time. Every
like?
single news host, every single contributor, everybody on the planet gets to chime in their 2 cents about a war with Ukraine just because they're doing drills, just like the U.S. does. They all do drills, man. That's what these idiots do. They live for this shit. They go line up and act like they're going to fight and play war. You know, dozens of countries do that constantly. And just because they're doing it close to this one country, Ukraine, these people want to make a headline news. You know, the Russia, the U.S. does that in the South China Sea. It pisses China off all the time. Flying around there, boats through there. Russia pisses off the U.S. all the time around Alaska.
Britain's Queen Elizabeth
And other
has
places.
tested positive for COVID-19. The 95-year-old monarch.
They buzz our planes and do shit.
Mild cold-like symptoms. CNN's Anna Stewart is live for us in Windsor, England. Anna, good
I haven't
morning.
heard many people in the military, or anybody in the military for that matter, talking about
Buckingham Palace saying
about
how
it, you know.
she's doing right now.
I just heard the military spokesperson talk, but I haven't heard like generals come in and say, "Oh yeah, he's definitely going to fire missiles from here to there. Look at he's got this. He's about to load this one." You know, I don't hear that kind of stuff.
They also said that she will continue to receive medical attention and will follow all appropriate guidelines. Now, medical attention may suggest that she was antiviral drugs or something like that. Given she's 95, they are animals with sort of high risk of severe disease from COVID-19. But currently, she's okay. Now, I don't expect we're going to get any real updates on the Queen's health unless it really significantly changes. And that's because Buckingham Palace really stopped giving a running commentary on the Queen's health in the last year. Not least, she has had some health concerns. Last October, she was admitted to hospital and underwent some testing. We're still not really entirely sure what for, but she was assigned bed rest. She can't.
She's like, I lived through the Spanish flu. This thing
Really,
ain't
ever
gonna take
since
me
then,
out.
they've been fairly tight-lipped when it comes to her health. We believe she is triple vaccinated, but we don't actually know. We knew that she had the first one at the beginning of last year with Prince Philip, who sadly died last year. What we assume she has had.
And you gotta feel horrible if you gave the Queen of England the virus.
She's continuing to work.
I don't think she has any enemies. I don't think somebody like.
Yeah, I saw that. Putting out statements.
Hope nobody tried to cough on her and get her sick. Pretty sad.
Thank you.
Super
Back here,
old.
Justin Bieber has
Super
also
old.
tested positive for COVID. The singer was postponed his show in Las Vegas last
Royalty.
night. His representatives were calling it a mild case as well. Bieber's Justice World Tour just started last week. The Las Vegas concert has been rescheduled for June. Still ahead for you, the game was a blowout. We'll show you how the Michigan-Wisconsin matchup almost ended in another blow. Plus, the final word today from both sides in the hate crime trial of 3 men convicted of killing Ahmaud Arbery.
Okay, everyone. Our mission is to provide complete balanced nutrition for strength and energy.
Poor Bieber.
What are the chances that that could happen, and how do we prevent that from happening? Because that's the big issue here.
Yeah, so there are a lot of historical analogies that we have to be careful to walk the circle around. This looks a little bit like 1936 Olympics, and you had where Jesse Owens, won so many medals for America, but that was only a very short period, but 3 years before World War II. So their intentions are very high. The notion that
This guy's a former naval intel
as
officer.
you say, suddenly announced to the world, indicating that they're going to redefine human rights and that they would like to declare themselves the powers that will define the future, is a direct throwdown to the Western European, but also the entire Western values, all of our values. And we need to throw back by saying, well, this is a battle of ideas, and free markets and freedom are going to win, not communism.
That's exactly right. There's so much riding on this moment right now. Robert, thank you so much for your perspective. We appreciate it. All right, Ashley? Okay, shocking video out of Canada shows a woman being trampled by mounted police as nearly 200 protesters are arrested in Justin Trudeau's crackdown on the Freedom Convoy, but that's not stopping truckers from next. Yes, he's going to tell us what's coming
That's wild, man. As well, how conservatives have latched onto the trucker convoy strike in Canada. Oh, God. Yeah. Oh, my God. It's just funny. Because it might seem magnanimous, kind of on the surface, but it's only 10% of the truckers, and like the two major trucker corporations aren't for it at all, not having it. So, but I respect that they're standing up for themselves and if they want to do it, and if they're going to protest, and it looks like it might be working. I don't know. A lot of countries are curbing things and planning to. And a lot of states are. Islands in Hawaii are starting to back down a bit. Like in Maui County. MLB cancels spring games through March 4th.
According to sources, MLB officials have told the...
That stinks. So MLB doesn't have their stuff together. I think they have to negotiate the contracts. MLB delays start of spring training.
Naturally disturbing scene in college basketball yesterday. Upset.
That'd be interesting. I wonder if we'll hammer that out before spring training. Because they're supposed to start really soon. Like the last thing Chris should be doing.
This whole thing started over a timeout, right?
Yeah, that's right, Laura. So the Badgers, they had the game won in the closing seconds, but they called a timeout to avoid a potential 10-second backboard violation, and that's what upset Michigan head coach Juwan Howard as he walked by the handshake line. Howard said to Wisconsin coach Greg Gard, all remember that. Gard then grabbed Howard to explain his reasoning for that timeout. A tussle ensued. Players started getting involved, and then Howard striking Wisconsin assistant coach.
That was weird.
Punches were also thrown by players. Ugly scene. Afterwards, Howard, though, did not apologize for that.
Someone touched me, and I think that was very uncalled for them to touch me as we were verbalizing and communicating with one another. So,
kind of got him. I couldn't tell if it was an open hand or a closed hand.
They got us a new 10 seconds. And helped them, get
might have been closed hand, and then he opened his hand right after, and then closed it back up again.
Came through the handshake line. So,
and everybody kind of paused and stood back for a second. He might have took an okay shot there. No, you know what? I think it might have been actually like a slap, and he kind of dodged it. They got to slow it down, like really, really slow to see it happen so fast. He like almost like karate chopped him. Looked like. So I don't know what to do with those. They're stupid. Well,
Looking for Cleveland for the NBA All-Star Game. Jordan won the NBA's 75th anniversary celebration, where they honored the 75 greatest players of all time. You see Jordan door's not closed for him to one-day play there again. He also told The Athletic he's going to do whatever it takes to end up playing his last year in the NBA with his son, Ronnie. So if you want LeBron on your team, just draft his son in a couple of years.
Very cool. Andy, before I let you go, can we just go back to Juwan Howard for a second? What do you think is going to happen to him? Is this definitely a suspension in the future for him?
Yeah, there's definitely going to be some sort of severe punishment, Laura. I imagine it's going to be a lengthy suspension, maybe even as much as the rest of this season. Obviously, the worst case scenario for Juwan Howard would be that he loses his job over this, and that's what a lot of people were calling for on social media. It's kind of become this big argument. He didn't instigate the situation, but he obviously was the one who threw the first blow. He escalated it. You're right. So, and we'll see. I imagine we're going to hear something from the Big Ten Conference in Michigan later today.
All right, Andy. Well, you just stay on top of it. Thank you. Coming up, a last-ditch effort at diplomacy as President Biden looks for a foreign policy win on Ukraine. Could this strategy backfire here at home? And following the backlash against Dave Chappelle's last Netflix comedy special, the streaming giant just decided to let him post and produce 4 new ones. That's next.
It's funny, because I used to watch Dave Chappelle's comedy. I thought he was hilarious. The Chappelle Show, oh my god. I still laugh at that. It's just out of control funny. But lately his humor hasn't really made me laugh. And I don't know. I don't care about his politics. And I think that's probably the crux of it. Because his jokes now just seem like they're like about certain topics. Like that he wanted the points he wanted to make and get across about society or whatever. And it definitely did not seem like it was just to make people laugh and out there to have fun and cut up and go nuts. So I don't know, man. He's gained a bunch of weight. He looks like he might be on steroids or some drugs or something like that. Different drugs, I mean. And probably some real ones. But yeah, that's too bad. Some people just change but you know what? It happens with rock bands normally. Like Guns N' Roses, their best album was when they're on the streets of Los Angeles and Appetite for Destruction. And then like look down the line when they, after Use Your Illusion, they released the Spaghetti Incident. And like who's ever heard of that? And do they even play any songs after that in concert? No. So, because they changed everything. They changed their environment, they changed their influences, and they changed. And same thing probably happened to Dave Chappelle. And ironically, he was with a white dude. Neil Brennan was the guy who co-wrote Chappelle Show with him. And now he's struggling to be funny. It's funny, I wonder if it's because he doesn't have Neil Brennan. But I think he just chooses to make agenda-driven jokes, and he thinks they're funny, or he thinks he's got enough money that he doesn't really care if he's funny, that he's out there to make these points, and that's really what he's there to do. Like a sitcom that's funny half the show and serious half the show or whatever. He doesn't want to be funny the whole time. He wants to say what he feels about stuff. So maybe you should get a podcast if that's the way he wants to approach his humor. You can watch it and tell me what you think. That's just what I was getting last time I heard his comedy. I don't know. I heard it was a alleged offensive joke, and I don't know. It didn't particularly bother me. I don't know. I think anybody should be able to joke about anything. Jokes should be off limits. Nothing should be off limits. Jokes should be off limits from scrutiny. It's a joke. That's supposed to be funny and make it. Sometimes they're offensive, sometimes they're not. You don't have to listen to it. Always turn the channel.
In the West, And yes, those are all president-named cities there.
We have real serious freedom of speech laws in the U.S. Businesses tend to do whatever the hell they want. But on the street corner, on your website, on your own time, whatever, on pad and paper, you express yourself any way you tell my please.
A teenager is shot 24 times by snacks at a gas station.
People may forget that as they do the herd mentality thing and fit into talking to everybody else like Twitter instead of finding their own outlet where they can say any goddamn thing they want at any moment. People are changing and they're becoming alike on Facebook and Twitter because they're abiding by the same speech and thought rules. It's going to produce people that are similar. Even less creative than that.
NT and our allies and partners are handling very well. It baffled me why, for the first time in the 2 decades I've been coming to the Munich Security Conference, Russia was boycotted. That gave an open stage to all the allies and partners, plus Vice President Kamala Harris, plus Secretary of State Blinken, to move together. And they are very closely lashed together now to talk about why.
When I was a kid, my dad didn't want me to be a musician. And when I was younger, he said I got nothing to sing about. Nothing to. I should do it when I'm older or something. So I just learned a bunch of instruments and stuff.
And desperately pled for more arms and more help. But the point is that this unified diplomacy is working.
That's a good point. What was I going to sing about? Like too much homework.
And I think Vladimir Putin is playing a bad
my date didn't go too well, or my date wouldn't go well. I don't know what the hell I was singing. Obviously, we didn't mean a whole lot when I got older. Unless I was able to tap into a universal, ambiguous way to kind of express it, which would have been real hard. Yeah, it would have been probably pretty simple stuff. Musically and lyrically, I would imagine.
Biden spoke with French President
Time,
Macron,
just
who,
time.
as you said, acted as a broker, where he had had multiple conversations with Russian
Probably like Hanson.
President Putin. And so they agreed to this on principle. But I want to be clear here that there is no time set, there is no venue set for this presidential meeting. It all exists in principle on the very high condition that Russia does not invade Ukraine at all. And of course, this comes after we heard lots of warning from U.S. officials over the weekend. We learned that U.S. intelligence officials had intelligence suggesting that Russia's Putin has actually given an order to his commanders to invade Ukraine. Of course, we heard President Biden on Friday make big news, saying for the first time that he was convinced that President Putin had decided to invade Ukraine. He had not said that before. So all of that comes after this. So in terms of what happens going forward, White House officials say that Secretary Blinken, who repeated that, as we heard, that warning that he believed that Putin had also made the decision to invade. Blinken will meet with his Russian counterpart Lavrov on Thursday, where they will iron out the stuff. But again, that meeting is on the condition that Russia should not invade Ukraine as well. So really, really conditional meetings here on principle. Nothing is actually certain. So if that meeting goes well, if they have it, then potentially we will hear more information about when this presidential summit could take place and how. But as Blinken said on State of the Union yesterday, that he said that Biden is willing to meet with Putin at any time and any place if it means that they can deter war. And so here we see that playing out.
It's TBD at this point. Jasmine, thank you. Appreciate it. Joining me now, CNN political analyst Rachel Bates. She's the co-author of a political playbook as well. Good morning to you, Rachel. I want to start here with GOP candidate J.D. Vance. He got in some hot water over the weekend.
Oh my God.
Saying he doesn't care.
It's amazing how many stories they don't want to talk about or refuse to, and how much they focus on certain things
Has the
sometimes.
president done enough to explain to the American
Wow.
people why Ukraine matters?
I mean, this is a perfect example of why Biden, President Biden,
Ukraine reminds me a little of Turkey. They're just like the gateway to the West. Sort of like the gateway between Asia and
This
Russia.
is a political reality, and that is a lot.
I mean Asia and Europe.
Couldn't pinpoint Ukraine on a map. it was a challenge during the
Because
first
they've got
impeachment
Russia to their
investigation
east
against
and
Trump.
sugar bombs.
It's going to be a challenge now. And so, you know,
Russia to the north.
President Biden has really got a tough job right now. I mean, he's had issues sort of selling his own agenda in the past in terms of highlighting things that were passed through Congress. Now he's got a tough thing here.
To the
Well,
west
why
of
we
it,
should be
so.
involved? Why should these sanctions go through? And again, he's just going to need to really articulate this is also in America's interest in the future of democracy and worldwide. And so it's a tough job. It's a really tough job.
Well, so, right, so to your point, there's never a good time for war, but this crisis comes at a tough time for this president still trying to position things carefully, of course, for the Democrats ahead of the midterms this fall. Do you see this issue affecting Democrats this fall?
It's going to really depend on how it impacts Americans' pocketbooks, I think. You know, right now inflation is at an all-time high for decades. Obviously, people are paying a lot more at the pump here in Washington. We're about $4 a gallon. And there's a real situation here that could arise if this summit that you guys were just talking about falls through and, you know, Putin ends up invading Ukraine. We could see oil prices spike even more, which could affect Americans here back home. Even though we don't rely a lot on Russian oil, we rely on, you know, other countries including our own. But it still impacts the whole world. The whole
War with Russia
oil
mean for
market. We could also see stock markets plummet, and that will impact Americans. And so, to the extent that it could affect inflation, it could affect the economy, and it could affect prices.
It's funny because Russia obviously
that
doesn't.
President Biden is going to be watching, and the administration is to be watching at a time when they're already getting pretty tough marks on these issues, right?
They haven't been
Voters
calling
are
the
really concerned about
people
these
that
things, and they want to see them addressed,
invaded
and they're not
Ukraine in
simple
the
fix. So this
years
absolutely
ago. They haven't
could
called
have
them
some
the
sort of
Russian
spillover
military.
effects
They
for the midterms.
So
call
what
them
are you hearing from your
separatists
sources on the
and
Hill? Are Democratic
a whole bunch of
lawmakers
other names.
prepared to back him if in
to
fact
keep
there
that
is
foggy.
a
They say
war in
Russian-backed
Europe? Are they prepared to
separatists.
sort of figure out how to shore up the messaging on this politically?
So who are they going to fight? Are they
People
going to fight
understand
Russia
why
in
it's
some
so
other
important.
country? Are they going to fight Russia in
I mean,
Ukraine?
look, I think they've been in
They're gonna fight
lockstep
Russia
so
in-
far. With
and
the
if
White
so,
House.
which part
We've
of
been in
it?
touch with them as they've been trying to negotiate some sort of sanctions in the Senate
imagine
bill. Obviously,
The entire
that's not
world
together
should
yet.
probably
But
ask
Democrats have
the
shown that, yes, they're going to be
separatists to
absolutely in
get
lockstep
out
with
of
this president. I think the interesting thing
the
to watch will be
northeastern
what
part
do
of the country.
Republicans respond to this. You know, they've been sort of trying
Or
to
disarm,
get, some
rather.
Republicans have been trying to get the White House to do
Let's
more
just start there.
advance,
Just disarm them.
of
Because they're
Russia's
shooting
moving
weapons
in
at
terms of moving into
innocent people.
Ukraine. Do they squawk about that?
So
How
yeah,
do they take
tell them
this
to stay there as
news
long
that
as you damn well please,
President
but stop
Biden
fucking
might
shooting
sit
weapons.
next to,
Goddamn
President Putin, which, as
psychopaths.
you know,
Why don't you tell them
loves
that?
to have a global audience. And so some people might say that sort of plays into his hand.
Because I think that's the point of the United States military is to have world peace, everybody not fucking scaring people and acting like assholes and fucking endangering goddamn people. So they should probably do that. But there's innocent people in eastern Ukraine and children and shit that have to deal with this bullshit. And they've had to deal with it for years and years now. And it's not very fair. So whoever's, they should tell the people to fucking disarm. And if they don't disarm, then they should have to pay the penalty of us dropping fucking bombs on them.
Now to this disturbing case of 5 people who were found dead inside an apartment in a Denver suburb on Sunday. Police in Commerce City say officers made the discovery after responding to a medical call at that apartment.
There were 3 females and 2 males that were deceased inside the apartment. But I can tell you, given the investigation, it does not appear to be one trauma or any violent incident of any moment.
Police chief says an adult and a baby were found alive inside that apartment and were taken to the hospital. The baby, thankfully believed to be around 4 months old, is said to be doing well. The adult is now talking to investigators. And this a fairly day at the beach in South Florida. Take a look at this video of a helicopter crashing into the ocean on Saturday. Within just a few feet of swimmers and sunbathers there. Wow, you can see that 2 people in the chopper were transported to the hospital.
This was
with stable
an
condition.
awesome video.
A third was not injured in that crash. The cause of the accident is
Let's pick up the
unknown.
helicopter out of the water.
Investigating.
have to tow that thing out of there, probably.
What drove Lyndon Johnson's decision to escalate the
What a
war in
disaster that
Vietnam, even as he pushed through the most productive legislative session in history.
If I'm not mistaken, I think the people lived.
LBJ Triumph of Tragedy continues tonight at 9. And closing arguments begin today in the federal hate crime trial of 3 white men who murdered Ahmaud Arbery. Could the case go to jury as soon as this afternoon? And Spider-Man actor Tom Holland topping the box office again with his new movie.
With the new Personal Points program, I answer questions about my goals and the goods I love. I like that the WWE Personal Points plan is built just for me.
That's not the issue.
Just last week, I heard Glenn Youngkin signed a bill into law banning math mandates in public schools and instead allowing parents to make the decision for their kids. On this President's Day, while foreign languages like the 1619 project,
Happy President's Day.
no roots to honor George Washington. The New York Post says the man remains a role model for all. The editorial board writing, quote, he carefully cultivated his virtues, self-control, moderation, ability, his strengths, physical and moral, to become the most widely admired president, first in 13 colonies, then in the new nation. The book goes on to say Washington created 2 American institutions, first the Army, which he commanded from 1775 to 1783, and second the U.S. government, presiding over the first years from 1789 to 1797. Tomorrow marks Washington's 290th birthday. 290, big birthday for him. A college basketball game erupts into chaos when a brawl breaks out on the sidelines. The coaches were the ones throwing the punches, and we've got that wild video. Stick around to see it next.
It's like clickbait kind of stuff like that. You see this guy get hit? Well, here, watch this commercial and don't go anywhere, and you can see his face pounded in. What a beautiful Southern Fox is. Dude, these. Alright, well, I'm gonna call it quits. Take care of yourself.